And welcome back to STS, Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. I've got Adam Leeper with us today. And as always, no one knows Adam better than Adam. So Adam, give us a little backstory, introduce yourself, bring us up to speed, and we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, first off, Richard, thank you so much for putting this together. Honored to be on your platform and a part of your podcast and give the viewers a good conversation, good lessons learned. So Coach Adam Leeper, but go by Coach Adam. I am more formally a business coach that specializes in all things leadership, more specifically teams, building effective teams and building effective systems on how to lead and guide those teams. One of my core beliefs is that, in order for us as entrepreneurs to see the freedoms that entrepreneurship brings, like calling your own shots, living life on your own terms, you need a very strong team behind you, and you need an ability, a routine way to be able to lead and guide that team so that they can grow the business and you can do what you want to do and what you find purposeful in life. And come to that through a little over a decade now of Army leadership experience in the Army National Guard as a logistics officer. And the last, I would say 5 years in my civilian side, I was in the corporate world in human resources and talent acquisition. So from multiple levels, so from mom and pop to mid-size companies with a few divisions spread out over in 2 places of the world, to large Fortune 100 giant global companies. So I've been able to see under the hood of what makes businesses at those levels tick and operate. And I'm excited to bring all of that knowledge to your audience today.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. So let me ask you a quick question then off that last little bit there. So you got the Fortune 100, you got your mid-size, you got your mom and pops. Of those 3, which is your favorite to work with?
The mid-size is my favorite to work with because they're hungry. Not to say the mom and pops aren't hungry and not to say that the big guys are hungry. I think it's a couple of things. Their hunger to grow, they're small enough to be agile and try new things and implement as they're solidifying what the systems and the culture looks like. I mean, that would be my 2 biggest reasons why I like them. And, they're more adaptable, right? I mean, that goes with the hunger, but they're just a little bit more adaptable to make those pivots. And it doesn't take, it's not like moving a huge cruise ship, trying to do getting out of the way, like the Titanic, trying to get out of the way. They're more of a mid-size like yacht or speedboat. Like they can be nimble and agile and move, but they still have enough history behind them to be legitimate.
Yeah, I love it. I agree with you completely. I love the agility aspect. You're right. When the ship gets too big, you got committees, you got boards, you've got a lot of middle management, a lot of stuff that to really make any big change, to really help them a lot, it's kind of difficult, right? It's very challenging. It's a different type of challenge. Let's call it a different type of challenge. Not that it can't be done, but I think your mid-sized business, what we call small to mid-size, I think for me too is it's enjoyable because you can see change. You can get to the right people who can make real decisions and implement things quickly, and you can see a change. You can make a difference. So from us as coaches, we're here to make a difference. Right now, if we're beating our heads against the wall for a year and a half and nothing looks any different than the day we came on board, that's not very rewarding. So you and I are very similar in a way. We want to get things done. Right? We want to see change. We want to implement. We want to build great teams. Even that, which I'd love to talk about since you're in talent acquisition, is that can be a challenge in itself, right? Because some people are looking for certain things that they, I'm going to air quote, think will apply, but they really don't to what the mission is, so they're not always enabling the person who's got to get this talent to choose the proper people because they're putting certain things before others that maybe are a little bit backwards. Would you agree with that, Ed?
No, absolutely. It stems from a not knowing, right? You don't know what you don't know is a common phrase, not just in the business world, but definitely in the military that we come from. And, before I go any further, thank you for your service and the way that you've paved. Now, I'm not a Marine, but I love to pay homage to and respect to the people who have come before me in either branch, because you all laid the foundation to, for where we are today, right? So, but yes, you don't know what you don't know. So you think because where you're at right now, how you got there, the things that you did, the stuff that you worked on is what's going to get you to move forward. And you're just, if I just bite down on my mouth guard and just keep pushing and grinding it out and working hard, like what got me to this level of business, then that's going to get me to the next level of business. And it's oftentimes not that at all, especially for business owners. It's oftentimes that you have to start pulling yourself out. You put in enough investment and sweat equity into the thing, but you have to start pulling yourself out and away from it and figuring out how the business can grow without you having your hands in it day in and day out.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really important too, because if we got somewhere, I've been in business, I've been doing entrepreneurial work for 35 years now. I don't do what I did 30 years ago. It's a whole different playing field, right? We have to always be adjusting now. And you're right when you said, what it took you to get there, but that doesn't mean it's the next guy's same path to get there, right? We have to adapt our business. And that's why I love that small to mid-sized business, because you seem to have more agility to accept that. But even when you are dealing with owners, and I'm sure you found this too, it is shifting the mindset, because we get a little comfortable. We work hard. We get things going. We're doing okay. But we have to keep challenging ourselves to go forward. And that takes a different kind of thinking, right?
It does. And what reminds me of what you're posing in that question is the operations order in the military. So in the Army, how we do it, right, is there's a section, because there's 5 paragraphs to it, right, to your operations order. There's one section in there that breaks down the phases of the operation. So if I was to take just that section and say, hey, phase 1 of you going, let's call it 0 to 100K in your business. Let's just make some round numbers. That's phase 1. There's so many different things that are involved in that phase 1 that you have to do. In that operations order, how we write it out, it might be a little paragraph of just telling us the narrative of what phase 1 looks like. So you can identify. But here's the gem out of it is when you're done with phase 1, towards the end of that little paragraph, it'll have a sentence to set you up to let you know when you are done with phase 1. Phase 1 ends is how the sentence starts all the time. Phase 1 ends with X, Y, and Z. Phase 2 begins with X, Y, and Z. And then you go down the page and you hit phase 2. What I see for business owners in that mid-size range that are trying to grow, that are getting stuck in those places in that growth mode, is they don't know, they haven't identified, they don't have the clarity of when phase 1 ends to when phase 2 begins, when phase 2 ends to when phase 3 begins, when phase 3 and usually ours is 4 phases, right? But at each phase, we know, as the commander, I know exactly when that phase ends, so I can transition into phase 2. And phase 2 is going to look different. I'm going to need to do different tasks. I'm going to need to maybe have different resources lined up and available. But if I plan well enough and I have at least, because we don't know the future, but if I can guess what the next phase is going to look like, or if I can dictate what I want the next phase to look like, I can set the conditions and say, this is how I know when I'll reach the end of phase 1, and this is what I need to start preparing for phase 2. So now you're not caught on the back foot. You're not behind the 8 ball trying to build upon the momentum that you already got, or you're losing steam and you're wondering why. Well, it's because you didn't define that.
Yeah, I think that is really brilliant, because the biggest thing that I find is people, it's basically lack of a plan. Okay, a start and stop point is part of a plan. And then you start again for the next phase, and the end of that phase is critical, because those are what we call our short-term goals. right? We can have the big vision. We know where we want to go. And eventually in 10 years, do this and make this much money and have kind of our exit strategy, but understanding where these phases lie. And I'll correlate this with some of my construction guys I work with, even in the job, the actual, we're building a home or we're doing a remodel or whatever that is. There's phases. We start here, we end here, and I drive it home by saying that's when you get to draw a check. Okay, so we have a reason to work there because that's when you get more money, right? So we get draws throughout the process. You need to know what that is, and your team needs to know what that is. Because if they don't know what success looks like, because these phases are what success looks like, and inside that start and stop is daily success, right? What it should look like. And then when you completely move on. So I really love that. I think it's a simple way to understand, how to proceed in your business. You have to have a general roadmap at least.
Absolutely. And you'll appreciate this from your time in the military, right? With land navigation, one of the things that they tell you is when you're even 1 degree off from your start to your stop point, that can mean miles of difference. So let's say you're going 2 clicks out or 2 miles out. You're trying to go 2+ miles out to find a point. You could be 500 to 600 feet off of your point because all you focused on was that end point. And that's like a long range goal. That's like hey, this is the target. This is the dream business I want to have. But like you're saying, what's the daily checkpoints? What's the phasic checkpoints? What's the draw checks? What do those points look like? Let's backwards plan from that. In land navigation, that's like, hey, I see this tree on the map or this mountaintop or this whatever figure, this point. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to check down on my compass. I'm going to make sure that my degree that I'm shooting is still right. So I know I'm still in the path. And then I'm going to keep walking. And I'm going to pick every 30 steps, like every day, I'm going to pick another point. I'm going to pick a tree. I'm just going to shoot it to that tree representing the next day. I'm just going to shoot the compass to there, and I know I'm on point. And I keep stacking those over and over and over again. I'm going to hit the point at the end of the day, or I'm going to be really, really close to it. You might not be dead on, but you'll get really close, and then you can look around and see it's right there.
Yeah, I think the key to that, Adam, is really understanding the dailies. Right? You can't hustle and grind, run hard. I call it ignorance on fire, right? You're moving because you're trying to, and next thing you know, 8, 10, 12 months goes by, and then you decide to take a bearing. Okay, really bad time to do it because you can't correct some major mistakes you could have made. Now you get to live with those. And that's going to be costly mistakes, bad decisions. You can be so far off on your business trajectory that now you're going to spend 30 days trying to get back on track. And you've already lost the money. That's never going to be regained, right? So all these little factors, when you're not paying attention to the course you're on, they add up, they compound. All these little things, those little missteps, things compound. Now, no one's perfect, but if you don't have a check and balance in there to be really understanding where you're going, are we on course? Like you're saying, it can be way off course. And when you're way off course, you're totally ineffectual.
Absolutely.
Right? You're good to nobody.
Absolutely.
Your customers, your family, nothing.
And you can't make those pivots that are going to be transformational. And here's the thing about those transformational pivots. If you're doing it right, do you really need to have big transformational pivots? Does every decision in your business need to feel like it was a miracle? Like we're in the holiday season, right? Does every decision then need to feel like you got a Christmas present? If you've done those routine checks, or if you get this big transformational shift from the mindset to the actual activities in the business, was it that you were too far away from where you were supposed to go in the first place? Yeah,
I think when you think of the word pivot, okay, I'll use a boxing analogy, right? I'm a boxer. So you and I were lined up, right? So we both got a left shoulder to each other. A pivot for me can be 3 to 4 inches swinging my right foot behind me, but it changes the complete angle. Now I've got you squared off. If I throw shots there, you're going to be squared off balance if you don't pivot with me, right? So some people think pivots mean this big, I get it, totally change direction of my business. No, they're adjustments. They're adjustments to set you up for the next strike. That's what they do. So pivots are small. They're not big. That's why it's a pivot and not, a directional change. I'm not doing a 90, or a 180. Right? I'm simply doing a pivot because like with radar, it kind of works like that, right? You've got a course and you do these pings that go out to a tower and they come back and they keep trying to set your course because you're always going left or right. There is no straight line. You ride a bicycle, you can't ride a bicycle in a straight line. It's impossible. You're always moving. So this is the point. When we think of our business this way, like you're saying, Adam, is we have to send the ping out, let it come back, help us adjust, right? Those are those things. We keep doing that while we're heading towards the destination. So it's a really good, I think it's a really good visual for everybody listening that they need to accept that because they get upset at themselves when they're not perfect. And it's just never going to happen. You're never going to be perfect. You're always going to be adjusting. If you go in the game knowing that, that's actually how you stay on point.
Everything is an adjustment. It's always an adjustment. And at least from the decade of time I've been in, that's one of the greatest lessons that I've learned as a leader is it's always an adjustment. You crush it, you still got to adjust. You come in underperforming, you still got to adjust. It doesn't matter when you look at it. It matters to an extent, right? Like, yes, you need to celebrate. I don't want people to think I'm so hardcore and I don't celebrate wins or anything else. However, in the back of your mind, you always know that there is some adjustment that's going to come. It's either you're going to adjust before the thing out there that you think is coming is going to happen so that you're prepared for it, or you adjust too late and you kind of see what happens off of that.
I think the other thing is we'll take it to the next thing is be debrief. Okay, after action. We get done, we went there, whether we did it well, halfway, we completely failed. We have to, again, analyze what was good, what was bad. That's another important thing. Once you do get to the point, it's the same thing of turning it around going, okay, well, this took us an hour and 45 minutes, or it took us a month and a half, or whatever it was. We were planning 30 days. It took us 45. How come? Right? Because that's how you adjust. That's how we create better systems. That's how we put things in place, right? We learn from that. We record that so it doesn't happen again. I think going back to what we were just talking about, too many entrepreneurs, too many business owners beat themselves up for that lack of perfection, not actually hitting the goal. Okay? But if they can look back and understand here was the goal, here's what we started with. What did we actually begin with to achieve that goal? To me, that's part of an after action. What did we start with? Did we have the tools? Did we have the resources? Or were we doing something with nothing? What was that? So we could really, really, really analyze the outcome and the process. Because if we're going to do it again, maybe say, well, listen, if we added this and this from a resource standpoint, we could easily hit it in that 30 days, maybe even 20, right? Because we understand. So I think as an owner, we really need to analyze our process of achieving things because that's what you want to fix, right? You fix the process, it becomes repeatable, and now you can predictably achieve these goals because you've done it before, right?
Absolutely. And I love, especially when I do field rotations with my crew, is the, after action review, sometimes they call it a hot wash. You go through a lane exercise, you get simulated that you got destroyed in that, and we take 10 minutes. Like, hey, first question, what was supposed to happen here? This was supposed to happen. Okay, cool. What did happen? Okay, this happened. Okay, now that we have our book ends, the ends of the book, what was supposed to happen and what did happen, let's fill in the pages in between of what could we have tried better, and then let's get out there and do it. And we keep those short as possible, packed with a lot of value, so that we can do the most important thing, which is taking action and getting back out there and doing it again and iterating. The faster you can get out and iterate again and again and again, the tighter that process, those systems in your business become, the more dialed in they become, to where you're spending less and less time having to review what's going on. And that 45 days or the 15 extra days that we were over, trying to do this in 30, we hit it in 45, start coming down. And now our after action reviews are probably, we're not spending a whole lot of time talking on like, well, we messed up here. What did we do? What can we do better? There's always room for improvement. Don't get me wrong. I don't think there's ever been a after action review that I've had with clients or, with my own teams that is absent of like, what can we do better? What can we change? What can we adapt? It just shifts to, instead of putting out fires and trying to correct mistakes, it shifts to what's out there in the future, what's out there 5 feet, 25 feet ahead of us in our business that we can start positioning ourselves and preparing for now, start acting on now. For example, AI. AI is still very young in its implementation, and there's all sorts of stuff like automation and how can you put that into your business, how can you use these systems, and almost every day there's something new coming out about it. I would argue that most businesses have no plan on how they're going to use it, especially small businesses. Unless you're in the tech field, most of them have no plan on how they're going to use it or how they can use it. But if they are able to shift into, hey, we've tightened up our processes on like the easy stuff, the majority mistakes that are costing us business or, plugging those holes up, now we can actually look ahead and chart the destination for how can we use this stuff that's coming in, like this future stuff that's already here now, that's still in its inception phase. How can we use it before we end up being a Kodak moment and we didn't act fast enough and then it ran us over?
Yeah, I think that's really good, Adam. I think what's important is to go back to your business has to be in a place, okay? Again, this is part of this goal setting, talent acquisition, getting the right people to do the work, that you can actually have the bandwidth to be able to think about this, right? And AI is a great example because you can start researching, get a little understanding, then bring it in small bite-sized pieces. Hey, we're going to write a little copy. We'll use it for that. We got ChatGPT. We got this. Hey, maybe we can do a few reports on this. Maybe I can start writing blogs and using that to assist us, right, to get out to it. Little things like that where you can get acclimated to it. Because like you're saying, if you wait too long, you're going to have a garbage truck of stuff dumped in your business that you know nothing what to do with it, right? You have no idea because you're so far behind the curve. You can no longer lead properly. You're ineffective. You're an ineffective commander because you haven't embraced these tools. They're just tools. However, whatever you want to think it's going to be Terminator or whatever it's going to be, right now you got to embrace it as tools. Use it for good. Get it done. Start implementing your business. And I'm speaking from experience because I've never really been an early adopter of things like technology and stuff like that. I am in other ways. I'm innovative in other ways, but not in that way. And I've completely changed my mindset on that stuff, because I have to. I need these tools. I see the speed in which they can create, think, and adapt. I have to have that. That's a competitive edge. And if you're going to ignore it out of fear or ignorance or whatever that is, you're going to lose a competitive edge in your business that could possibly take you out of the game.
No, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, is that competitive edge. What made you competitive to begin with might not be the thing that keeps you competitive as life goes on. So and I've been doing a little bit of research on this. Have you heard of The Infinite Game, that book by, what's his name? Oh, he's one of my favorite authors, and I'm blanking on his name. Either way, the book is called The Infinite Game. Have you heard of it or heard of it? I've heard of
it. Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
So I haven't read the book, but where the author gets the title from and the theory is from a professor, I think he was in the 60s or 70s, don't quote me on that, named James P. Cars, who made this game theory called infinite and finite games. And all it boils down to is finite games are games that we grew up playing. Football, baseball, basketball. There's a set of rules. You may have an advantage because of those rules. There's a specific time. There's supposed to be a winner or a loser. Infinite games like politics, business, health and fitness, relationships, they don't have the same setup. There is no real winner or loser in these games. And you can determine if you're farther ahead or farther behind when it comes to that. The reason why I bring this up is when people feel like, business owners feel like I'm not winning in my business, I'm losing now. And what advantage that you had is now not so much an advantage anymore. It's not a moat per se. It's because you were playing the wrong game. Your rules or your way that you play the game has to evolve and change because your competitors or who you see as competition are changing and evolving the game. For example, that comes out of the book is Apple versus Microsoft. So when Apple came out with the iPod, Microsoft was playing a finite game, and they said, we have to beat Apple. So they came out with the Zune player. The Zune was so much better, arguably, of a technology than the iPod was. So the author he finishes this Microsoft conference, and then he goes to an Apple conference. And he says, hey, Microsoft Zune player is way better than yours. What are you going to do to respond to that? He said, yeah, we know that. And later on, I believe they came out with, I think it was that year, later on that year, they came out with the first iPhone. So they were playing a completely different game. The advantage that Microsoft felt that they had, which really wasn't an advantage, Apple was playing a completely different game. They were saying, well, we're looking out farther and we're testing things out in the future. We don't really care what the rest of the market is responding to. We are going to continue to kind of bend the rules a bit to make sure we have the advantage at all times. And they've done that successfully for years.
Yeah, that's strategic thinking, right? They understand it, and it's not even knowing their end game because there isn't one. If you take an infinite game, there's no end game.
Correct.
Right? So the strategy is constant innovation. Now, they tied it also in with branding and their marketing, right? And they understand who their clients were specifically. If you just showed the white headphones in a black and white picture, right? You had the headphone, it's Apple, right? They were so good at that, right? So they weren't just promoting the equipment. It's not, like you said, it's not better technology. I get this discussion with my son over the iPhone compared to whatever his Android is or Galaxy or whatever it is. Like, I could care less. To me, it's as long as I can talk to someone, I'm okay, right? But I get it, but I love the simplicity of it, right? I'm a Mac guy, great. That's what I do, and I use that stuff. So it's just the strategy that I love when you see it. And now there's enough time in that infinite game of technology to compare these two. It's amazing to see. Like you said, we can sit here now and we can discuss this because we can see the result of it. Where would we have been in 2003?
Right.
2001, right? Talking about an iPod and this. It's just a Walkman. It's just another Walkman. That's all it is. Who cares? And I was around when they came out with a Walkman. All right, you got a little cassette and everything else for like $300, for these things. And, we had one kid got his ripped off in high school. I was in high school, like whatever, I was a freshman or sophomore. And then they banned them because someone got their stolen because there was so much money. Like, okay, you can't have them in school anymore. The whole high school banned the Walkman, right? Like, we think about that now, like people like have a hissy fit if they can't have their phone, answering texts every minute of the day. But it's just interesting when you see it, that long game. And I really love what you brought up because it is the infinite game. Or yes, infinite. It never ends, right?
Right.
So it's not a finite game. It's and if we can take that attitude in business and let's tie it into leadership now. Let's take the same concept and let's talk about from talent acquisition to actually building leaders. Let's go in that direction with this concept because this could be kind of interesting because people think a leader's a leader. They just think, well, some people think you're born a leader, other people you're developed as a leader. But let's get into the concept of leadership development in and of itself, because I think that's also an infinite process. Do you agree?
Absolutely, and that's what the book is about. Again, I've read synopsis of it, but it's talking about leadership as an infinite game, especially in the context of business. To break it down with how I see it, right, before we even get to the talent acquisition piece, you have to understand just about everything that you can of the business, right? Not to the depth and the level of the specialists or the experts that you're going to bring in, but you have to know enough to be dangerous. This is what I say to my young officers who are just getting in uniform and they're learning by a fire hose and they're trying to get their grounding and figure things out. And I say, hold on. I don't need you to know everything about logistics. I don't need you to know everything about these 3 different sections, platoons. You have maintenance and distribution and all that. No, I need you to learn the basic flows. I need you to just absorb enough information, because what that's going to give you is your capabilities and your capacities. And I was just having a conversation or a coaching call yesterday with a tech founder that I coach, and he's struggling with this. So I'm like, before we start bringing people in, what are your capabilities and your capacities in your business, right? When it comes to people, what are these people supposed to be doing? What's the whole purpose? Where are we going with that? If you know that for you, for your position, what your purpose is, what the purpose of the position is in the business, what it serves, and what the general function of it is, then you can start working backwards or working down to the lowest level of what is their functioning, their position. So I look at it by task, purpose, and end state. That comes from time in the military, right? What are the tasks that are general tasks that this position is going to be doing 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, because that other 2 times out of 10, they're probably going to be doing special projects and what have you, right? But what is the general tasking organization of this position? How does it fit within the context of the whole business and the team? So, like, what purpose does this person serve, right? And where are they going? So what purpose do they serve? How does this fit to the general team dynamic? And how do they play well with others? Or how does their role impact other roles on the team? Are they going to be doing the same stuff as somebody else over here? Or are they going to be doing something completely different that feeds into these other roles or these other business units as you keep growing and expanding the business? And that's how I tend to look at it. Every position on that team, I try to look at it like your ideal customer avatar or ideal customer profile. Call it your ideal team member profile or ideal team member avatar. And I want to get really detailed on what this person looks like. Even give them a name if you want to, a narrative, and go that deep. But I have to have an understanding as the leader of the whole chain first to be able to do that, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it's very important. I totally get it. People have to know, again, too many, even owners and general leaders, managers, they have to understand that, intense knowledge of the process of what someone on the team needs to do is inconsequential to their job, right? That's, understand. It's important to the position and the person. There's a level of competency you need, right? But that's what they do. Because imagine if you're over 10 different people, right? You got to know 10 different ways at that depth, at that level. You just can't. I think you're right, Adam. You're talking about how do they fit in the puzzle, really, right? So we talk about that. That's why like peer reviews are real important, right? Are they a team player? Or do I have an outlier here who completely works by himself, is not going to get along on the team? He may still have a place in the company, but you can know where the small room you're going to put him in. He'll be happy, because he's going to produce something we need produced, but maybe he's not going to work well with others, but he's still going to give us what we need, right? We just need to understand that. We limit that exposure, if you will. So I think it's really important to understand what you're saying is understanding, the full path, okay, and how you're filling in these pieces. I call it part of our strategic vision, and how are they the hero in that part of the journey? How do they fit in here? How do they understand what they do and why they're important, right? They have to understand that. They have to have that purpose. But you need to you have to connect all those dots so that you can have the flow that will complete the mission.
Absolutely. It's, as a commander, I just need to know, like I said, need to know enough to be dangerous. But I only know that because I need to assess what right looks like for those positions, so I can have quality conversations in these after action reviews, in these feedback sessions, and not feel like I'm just blindly trusting somebody who I think fits the mold, fits the role, but I'm able to trust but verify. That's very huge on our officer side, is being able to trust but verify. And the way you do that is knowing, at least, in the military we have documentation for everything. We can look at SOP, all this other stuff, right? It might not be that way in your business, and that's fine. But if you have documented already, made that roadmap and that vision of the type of person, position I need for this to be successful in this business unit or what have you, then when you're interviewing people, and let's take it a step back. When you're putting out a job description, I used to, because I worked for a little bit of time as a recruiter and kind of moved up into the data analysis phase of it and everything else, but working alongside of hiring managers who hiring isn't their thing, right? Their thing is engineering or what business unit they're in. What would irk me is they would pull a job description out that was an older job description, a requisition, and they would just dust it off and say, yeah, that's about the person we're looking for, with doing no extra work because they didn't take the time to go back and assess. Especially if somebody had moved on, they either left or got promoted out of the role. They didn't take the time to look back and say, this is actually more so what I need versus what this job description looks like. So I'm going to build it that way so I can attract the right people. But again, I'm putting in there what I want that person to look like, what I've already decided in my head, what I've already said works on paper. So then when I'm interviewing people, it in reality should not take me that much time to find the right person. It's like one of those when you know, but how do you get to that point? Well, it's because you've already had the definition up here or you wrote it down. Right. You already know that what you're looking for. So when you find it, you're like, oh, that's the person. Or I got a couple of candidates for this. And that's a different conversation on splitting the hairs there. But because you've done the work ahead of time before we even start to put the requisitions out on LinkedIn or Indeed or Monster or whatever job board, or start making calls and going to recruitment agencies, because they're going to ask you, recruitment agencies are going to ask you the same thing. Like, what is, at least a good recruiter would say, what would be a typical day for this person? Essentially what they're asking is, what does right look like for this person? So I can go find that person for you and know that I'm bringing them in.
Yeah, I think you're right. Again, we talked about what does success look like in the position, right? The day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year, whatever that looks like. But I think outcomes are that final measuring tool if you've got the right person. Right? When we understand the outcome and they're producing the right outcome, right? Once you hit that point in your business, now you can go back and look at these same people and say, okay, why are they, it's great you're getting the outcomes, but okay, now let's really understand who we have here, because everybody leaves, people get promoted, like you're saying, everything else. Like, now we can build a candidate profile, like you're saying, because we understand the outcome and who can get the outcome. Right, it's not a new position like you just invented it. You've had people who have been through it maybe once, twice, different people, but start to understand who's producing the best outcomes and what's the makeup of that person, right? Why do they fit in this position? Because like you're saying, that's the mold you're going to create. That's the template that we want someone to be able to fit into. And if they can do that, we have a way higher probability of success with this person and being able to retain that person, because they will know what success looks like, because we've already determined what that is. And we know that in general, they're going to be able to duplicate these outcomes that we need. And that's a good mix.
And then because you talked about delegation earlier, so part of my coaching program. It's called Operation Pathfinder. Part of that, do 4 phases, but in the second phase, I'm looking at that leader and I'm doing what's called, I take them through a genius framework. Genius is an acronym, but the goal of that is to find their zone of genius. Reason being is because when we're talking about that mold of the right person to bring in, we're looking at what I feel like if you want a high level, everybody wants a high level team, high level person in the business. If you want those high level people, those are the ones that when they get into this position, whatever you determined it is, and they're a genius at this, meaning they can creatively solve problems that most people can't creatively solve. So if you, Rich, could hiring people, if you could only think of 2 solutions for a problem on how to hire somebody, but I can think of 10 different solutions, and out of those 10, I can fuse 3 or 4 of them together to make new solutions and then fuse those, and I can create this. My creativity is just endless and boundless in solving these problems. That is what I get out of, or what I get my clients to get to, is find that person. First off, find that for yourself so you know exactly what area of the business you are going to maximize with very little effort, right? That flow state kind of comes out. And then find those people that can, in the different areas of the business that you are not a genius in, you plug those holes with them. That becomes the mold, right? So we can go with what does the top player look like? Somebody who's solving these problems seemingly out of nowhere within 5 minutes. And then what does a sustaining player look like? Because you're not always going to attract reality, the greatest people. And sometimes you'll have them for a time and then they'll either promote up or they'll promote out. They'll leave the business, right? So what's that? The highest end and the lowest end. And those are the molds. That's the mold that you're looking for. So that at least we can maybe hit a sweet spot there and know that the business is at minimum going to sustain itself and I can pull myself out and go do what else I need to do. But at maximum, it's going to be crushing it.
Yeah, I think I was on another podcast talking with someone about something similar, meaning that there's a process, okay, to building leadership. There's A player traits, okay? People have traits. Doesn't mean they're always going to perform as an A player.
Correct.
But if you understand what some of the traits, that's so we can begin with, right? That's the material, the right kind of clay that's going to mold, right? Not too watery, not too hard. It's moldable, right? But then you need to build a process in your business that can take them from that just plain clay, but the right clay. Now they go through phases where now they're molded and brought into the leadership category at the proper level. Right. So it's always about leadership development. And let's talk about that real quick because it's kind of what you do, right? It's part of what you do. So let's kind of get a handle on what that actually looks like and why people need to understand you don't hire the top, I hired the perfect leader and then you can just turn them loose. Usually doesn't work that way in a company, right?
No, it doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of context there, right? There's a lot of culture that they have to learn, as long as you've been intentional on setting that for your business and what that looks like. But outside of that, leadership is typically how I've seen it, especially in the corporate world, is the best performer becomes the leader, right? Gets that management position, what have you. And that's the wrong answer 100 times out of 100. You will miss the mark. The ones that bring it more tangible, the ones that show certain skills, so being able to, again, creatively solve problems within the constraints that they're given. So they're not going out and trying to we need this to solve this problem. It's we're given this problem already. How can I creatively solve it myself with what we have native to us? And then as we get better, so how can they creatively solve problems? Do they show that? Right? That's one check. Another check is delegation, right? How do they at first handle when you delegate to them? Do they take the task or the project and do they run with it and own it on their own and say like, hey, win, lose, or draw, this is all on me, even though it's always a reflection of you? But are they going to make it their own and lead the conversations? Are they going to, in the feedback sessions, Are they going to come very prepared and lead with what they need, with what they're doing? Are they showing that activity? Yes or no, right? Easy there. So we have those first two. Can they creatively solve problems? When they are delegated things to them, do they own up on it, and do they make it their own? And then in that also, when they move up, when you move them up and give them some responsibility, maybe you give them some supervisory responsibility, do they delegate with a process that's similar to yours? Do they inspire other people, right? When they delegate, do they try to get that buy-in and that ownership from the other person? So that's all in there too. 3, how do they make decisions under pressure? And you can create pressure within the business, or the business will automatically have some pressures based on the problems. How do they handle that, right? What do they do to handle that pressure? Those are 3 quick and easy. There's a lot of there are other things in that skill set that you want to look for, or skills in that skill set that you want to look for. But some of those skills you can't really assess until you give them more responsibility. But those are 3 simple ones that I feel are very foundational to any leader, and that you can assess right away if does this person have potential to step up. And if not, you can actually work on those 3 things with them.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think one thing you said in the beginning too, people often pick these high performers to be leaders / management. And I'll tell you from my experience as well, 30 plus years, performers want to perform. Okay. You don't have the best tight end in the NFL wanting to be a coach. Okay. Most of them can't coach. They do. Right? And I can give you a lot of examples of that, right? A lot of guys are great athletes. They're performers. They can't coach. Just give them the ball and they'll do what they do. But they're not going to plan out the play, right? There's going to be a part of it. And it's important to understand that. And you're right. A lot of them make that mistake. There could be a guy who can't perform to half the ability of your top performer, but he can help everybody else do it. Right? He brings the team together, man. He keeps the guy who's slacking a little bit. He brings him back up, with encouragement or whatever that is. So the big takeaway here is really understanding that you create and you build leadership. Okay. It's not the pick of people are picking wrong. They don't know how to quantify a quality leader. I think that's what it is. And that's what you're saying, Adam. It's really, you don't know how to quantify it. It's not based on performance alone. There is a factor of that, right? People have to be doers. They got to get things done. But there's so many other factors I think people are blind to because they haven't learned that, right? They don't understand that that's part of the selection process. And once they understand the selection process and the elements to it, that's when they're going to start getting better leaders on their team.
Absolutely. And again, it definitely ties back to, so I'll give you one thing in a second, but to kind of double down on that, it goes back to the selection process, the design at the beginning. You get the design somewhat right and then dial it in from there. It doesn't have to be perfect to begin with. Again, we want to iterate, right? But you can get that design right of the threshold of top and bottom, like what is a sustaining, what's a top player. You get it right, then you can start designing the rest of the game on what the leadership qualities start to look like. But an easy trick or an easy hip pocket thing that your listeners can take if they have a team. When you do these feedback sessions, the feedback sessions I absolutely love because they can be so informative in more than one way. But when you do these feedback sessions, start asking questions and stop giving answers. Unless, because there's always a caveat there. If it is a decision that only you as the leader, you as the owner can make, then yeah, I'm not going to ask. I might ask for a couple people's input, but really, I should already see that problem and I should be making steps to make the changes. But when it's not an emergency situation, start asking questions. How would you do this? They bring a problem to you. Yeah, we have this problem. And if they don't immediately start saying what their solutions would be that they would propose, and maybe they just want you to weigh in on it, ask them, okay, so how would you get this done? What would you do? What would your plan be? How would you, what would you, And you just keep asking those questions. How would you do this? What would you do? And why? What's the purpose? What's the reason behind it? See what they come up with and what they say. That's how I've been able to build great leaders, especially in uniform and also outside of it, is I ask them questions. And sometimes they hate it. But my executive officer, she is amazing, and she is right now ready to take over any company in the Guard, right? She is that capable. She needs time and grade, whatever, but she's that capable. Why? Because I don't give her answers. I give her questions.
Right.
And she gives me answers. And then we run her play. And if her play is successful, let's go. Let's run it again. Give me something else you would do. Do this. Until she gets really stumped, then that's where some of the extra wisdom and my take starts to come into that. But most of the time, no. I'm not giving you answers. I'm asking you questions because I want the answers from you.
Yeah, I love it. We do something similar. It's the 3S policy, so everyone on the team, if there's an issue, someone runs into a problem, they have to do this. First, they state the situation. That's the first S. What is it? What's going on? The second thing they're going to do is solutions. So give me 1, 2, 3 solutions, what you would do, just like you were just saying. And the third thing is a suggestion, which one? So pick one. You gave me 2 or 3, now pick one. Bring that to me. You bring that to me, I know what it is. I know what you've had to come up with solutions. You had to do some work. And then you get to choose the hard part. You got to pick the one you think is best. And I'll say, good job. That's the one I do too. Or I'd say, you know what? That's not a bad one. But if you do that, this could happen, this could happen. This one will handle that and negate those things going wrong. This is the ideal one. Now they just learned. They got to create it. Same principle, right? So we always want to be challenging our people in the question way, like you're saying. Ask them, what would you do? My kids would, how your kids go, you ask them, why'd you do that? Well, I don't know. I go, well, if you did know, what would you do? You always had that fun, and they tell you an answer. But if you let them off on, I don't know, no. Well, if you did know, what would you do? And you make them think and come up with an answer, they solve the issue, right? So I love it, man. This is great. So I think to wrap all this up, kind of the big umbrella here of leadership, which is a really vast topic.
Very.
Okay, I mean, we can go in a lot of directions on leadership, but I think we've narrowed it really well on the team building, really understanding what puts a leader together, and it's not what most people think, right? We really have to look at it differently. And again, from an owner standpoint, so again, we're talking small, mid-sized business, we tend to get in our own little bubble, if you will, the way we do something. Okay, well, why aren't they like me? Well, they're never going to be like you. Otherwise, they'd be the owner of their own business, right? So we always have to understand about what our goal is to develop the leadership in our teams and the teams in general, right? But you can't build a team if you don't have a leader. And you can't always be the leader as the owner. A leader's job is to build other leaders, right? And we spent just an hour now talking about how to build a leader, right? What you're looking for, which I hope has been just extremely valuable for people. So any final thoughts on this as Coach Adam?
And I thought I opened with this, and I didn't. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And like you said, the goal of the leader is to guide and develop other leaders. And my last on that is, again, what you just said, is if you're looking for people who are just like you, care just like you, about your business just like you, they would be in business for themselves, and they'd probably be in your same area of business, right? That's never the goal. Stop it. If that's you, who's out there, stop it now. People care about what they care about. However, we can all buy into a general or a similar purpose and values of the business and of the owner and leader of the business, and everybody can choose to be on this path with you in a very meaningful way that's meaningful to them. But it might not be the same meaning, and that's okay. As long as we're all in the same car, moving forward together, what's the problem, right? Learn what's really important on developing people so that, again, as an owner, you can pull yourself out of the weeds. You can enjoy the fruits of your labor before you get too old and can't do it, or you have to do it. And your team in business is massively effective and is able to grow without you putting too much effort into it.
That's awesome. That is exactly it. I love it. So, Coach Adam, how do people get in touch with you? How do they follow you, get in touch with you, want to talk to you about you helping their leaders? What do they got to do?
Yeah, I will. If I haven't already, I think I sent you all my social media links, but best place that I'm very active, or places I'm very active on, is my podcast, Forge the Way, on YouTube. I'm having issues getting it to other places right now, but you could find it still, some of the older episodes, on Spotify and Apple and I think iHeartRadio. But primarily on YouTube once a week, if not twice a week, I upload episodes to that. You can follow me on, or connect with me on LinkedIn, Adam Leeper on there, and you can follow me on, I think it's Instagram is Coach Leeper or Coach Adam, but again, it should be corrected in the.
Worries, no worries. All good. Yeah, we'll have everything in the show notes. But Adam, this has been awesome. This has been a great time on leadership. I really appreciate your time, your effort, and your time in the service. You've done a lot more time than I did. Okay, and I appreciate you still going after it. That's a good thing. I really appreciate it. So, man, this has been fantastic. Thank you for bringing all the wisdom. And we'll have to do another session on another direction on leadership. I think we got a lot more to talk about. So, again, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'd love to come back.
All right, and everybody, we will see you on the next Sharpen the Spear podcast.